the woman's right to choose is in jeopardy. It's yes or no. It's black or white. It's binary. There is no middle. I'm going to sign an executive order that protects a woman's right to contraception in the state of New York. In the words of President Trump, if you are against a woman's right to choose, you're fired. Thank you, and God bless you.
Good evening, and welcome to Metro Focus. I'm Jenna Flanagan. The battle to protect women's reproductive rights is mounting in New York State. In a series of rallies, Governor Cuomo is placing pressure on state Senate Republicans to take up the Reproductive Health Act, with fears mounting over the potential reversal of Roe v. Wade. Cuomo's push comes as President Trump made one of the most consequential decisions of his presidency to this point, nominating Brett Kavanaugh for the Supreme Court, setting the stage for a bruising confirmation hearing. Now, Kavanaugh's judicial career began as a law clerk to the retiring Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy, and he'd later go on to serve as an advisor in President George W. Bush's White House before being nominated to the District of Columbia Appeals Court. Kavanaugh confirmed he aims to reach out to members of Congress on both sides of the aisle immediately.
Tomorrow, I begin meeting with members of the Senate, which plays an essential role in this process. I will tell each senator that I revere the Constitution. I believe that an independent judiciary is the crown jewel of our constitutional republic. If confirmed by the Senate, I will keep an open mind in every case, and I will always strive to preserve the Constitution of the United States and the American rule of law. Thank you, Mr. President.
New York Daily News reporter Ken Lovett has been following the developments at both a federal and a state level closely, and I'm pleased to welcome him to the program. Ken, welcome to Metro Focus.
Good to be here.
All right, so let's start with just this reaction from Governor Cuomo. We see him now talking about codifying a woman's right to choose into state law, but there's already pushback on his decision to do that now.
Well, he's getting hit from the left and right on it. It's something the governor has spoken about for a while now. Those on the left, though, say he really hasn't followed up his words with action. Cynthia Nixon, in particular, who's running against him in the Democratic primary, she said that he helped embolden the Republican Senate that had controlled the chamber and that has blocked the Reproductive Health Act, which would strengthen New York's abortion laws. And then on the right, they're saying that the governor is just playing politics, afraid of Cynthia Nixon, so he's going to make this a big deal. He has said this week he's going to go into the districts of a number of vulnerable Republicans, Senate Republicans, call on them to go back past the Reproductive Health Act or face consequences at the polls in November.
Yeah, and of course that was something that we also heard the governor saying, is that if you support Trump, which I guess is now what the governor is equating not passing the Reproductive Health Act to, you'll be voted out of the state Senate. Now, of course, we're seeing him go to some different districts where Senate Republicans being challenged by Democrats. Does this look like a winning strategy?
Well, it's certainly a different strategy for the governor. He's trying to, boost his standing within the base, especially on the left of the Democratic Party. But this is a guy who had a non-aggression pact with the Republicans. He worked very closely with them for the first 7 years or so of his term and of his two terms. And he really worked with them. He helped them. And his narrative for so many years was, even though Congress is gridlocked, look at all the work we're getting done in New York, whether it's passage of gay marriage or gun control, with a split legislature, with the Republicans controlling the Senate and the Democrats the Assembly. Now he's going full bore against them, and he's at war with the Senate Republicans because he is also facing a challenge from the left in his own Democratic Party.
Of course, and speaking of that challenge from the left, we see Cynthia Nixon endorsing challenges not to Republican state senators, but to IDC members from the left. And I'm wondering do you get a sense that the public is paying enough attention to the minutia of the way Albany works to really appreciate what some of these challenges mean in the larger scheme?
I don't know if the public overall is, but you got to realize that a primary vote electorate is very limited. So if you have a bunch of Democrats on the left who are really charged up. They don't like Donald Trump. If they want to come out and, and really flex their muscle, then maybe you're going to see some upsets, whether it's within the legislative primaries or even against the governor, although that's still a long shot. But, we saw it in Queens during the congressional primary where Joe Crowley, a guy who could have been Speaker of the House, was defeated by an unknown. And now you're seeing that has really charged up the left, and they feel they can duplicate that.
Okay, and one last question about New York State's Reproductive Health Act. Now, we also know that the governor signed an executive order. Where does that fit into this plan that he has to codify this into state law?
Well, the executive order doesn't do what he wants. It allows, contraceptive coverage. It requires, insurance companies to cover such things. But the Reproductive Health Act basically would strengthen the New York's abortion laws. It doesn't just codify Roe v. Wade. It would take, the abortion law and take it out of the criminal law, put it into the health law, so you can't be charged with a crime for performing an abortion. It would also allow non-doctors, physician assistants, et cetera, to perform abortions. So it does make changes. But the reality is, if Roe v. Wade went away, New York does have a law that would protect, a woman's right to choose. What the Democrats want to do is strengthen that law. New York's law was passed 2 years before Roe v. Wade.
All right, and now I do want to turn a little bit to the federal level of government. And so we have this nominee in Brett Kavanaugh who at least has a very long paper trail for us to sort of extrapolate a little bit about where he might stand on certain issues. And so is it fair to say that we can expect him to definitely vote in a way that would undermine Roe v. Wade?
Well, it's funny. Of all the names that were out there as potential candidates for or appointees to the Supreme Court by Trump, his was the only one, where he has not taken a public position on abortion and Roe v. Wade. The expectation is he has a conservative record that he probably would, but he has not said he would do away with Roe v. Wade. So, that is kind of a blank slate. There was an immigration case years ago that he decided that he was in the dissent and said that someone was being held here, who was an undocumented immigrant, was not entitled to the right to an immediate abortion. So maybe that's a sign. But we don't know where he stands on that issue. But he is expected to be a solid conservative vote on the court moving forward, which could make John Roberts, who voted in favor of keeping Obamacare, the chief judge, could make him the new swing vote.
Okay. Now, of course, we do have a confirmation a series of hearings coming up. And I'm wondering, even though the Republicans do have 51 votes in the Senate, is there a chance that our own Senator Chuck Schumer can mount enough of a defense or offense, I'm not even sure which word to use for this, to perhaps peel off one or two Republicans or stop swing state Democrats from voting?
There are some Republicans who have said that, Roe v. Wade would be a big issue for them, that, there's one or two of them who say that if Roe v. Wade were to be overturned, they would not want a judge who would do that. But then you're going to have Democrats who are running in, states that support Trump that may not want to go against the president on this. So it's going to be an uphill battle. The Democrats are charged up. They feel they were ripped off from this seat after the Republicans failed to nominate or appoint, I should say, President Obama's nominee, and they feel that they got robbed out of a seat. So they're going to try and block this as much as they can. Whether they're successful, that remains to be seen. I think it's unlikely.
All right. Well, listen, Ken, I want to thank you so much for joining us on the show. We'll be following your work to get a sense of how this plays out with the confirmation hearings.
Anytime. Be well.
Thank you.